Hey, I'm Natalie, and welcome to the Dyslexia and Adults podcast. I believe that dyslexia is holding you back in your career and impacting your daily life, and ultimately slowly chipping away at your confidence. And I just simply don't think that is good enough. I don't care when you were diagnosed, if your boss is a total dick, or if, like me, you roll your eyes heavily when dyslexia is called a superpower. I know I can change how you feel about your brain. This week on the podcast, we're talking about learning new information. Katie, let's get started.
First off, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I was scrolling through the dyslexia subreddit the other day, and I was thinking about this topic because you said we were going to record on it. And I just kept seeing it's like one in every four posts. I've always wanted to learn a new language. My child needs to learn a language for school. I need to learn how to, do grammar in whatever language. And it got me thinking, I know a foreign language, kind of, and you know a foreign language, kind of. We both have been successful with it. So how do you translate those skills into like reality? So my foreign language of choice is American Sign Language. And I learned it in high school and I also learned it again in college. It seems like an easy jump for a dyslexic because you're not learning a new alphabet or anything, but you went and learned Spanish or are learning Spanish. How are you doing that?
I won't lie, it's not the easiest thing I've ever started to do, but it brings me such joy and I don't find it a chore, which I think is the bigger flex. I have classes and I have a very systematic way that I go about it. And it's getting in there, Katie. Like when I first landed in South America, I could say hola, gracias, la cuenta por favor, and that's it. And I can have really boring conversations, but I can have conversations, and yeah, it feels good. So I definitely feel like I now know how to learn a language as a dyslexic person, and more than that, because of how we've approached the business, I know how to learn new things as a dyslexic person. And just knowing that I know how makes everything easier. I've changed my whole mentality from I can't to I can, but it might be harder for me. And that is
Okay.
just a huge shift.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I know like, basics. I can count to 10 in Spanish. I learned as a kid, right? I'm not going to go on a rant right now about why we should be teaching children foreign languages. Like that's when your brain is a sponge. As an adult, it's way harder. But the things I learned as a child about Spanish I've held on to, which is like a couple of colors and how to count. It's the grammar piece that absolutely baffles me. So for me, sign language, American Sign Language, just to be clear, British and American Sign Language are two very different languages. The British system is two-handed and the American system is one-handed. Um, but learning sign language, it's a super visual language, which is something I love. If you're watching the podcast on YouTube, you'll see the letter C in sign language looks like a C. The letter D looks like a D. When you say go, you're pointing to a place. So it's really, really visual, which is what I liked. And then, writing it is just rearranging how you speak in English. But I realize when I see systems like that now, as we're like adults and in the actual corporate space, I'm using that visual piece in how we work. So we have Notion as a company, and our to-do lists are really visual. And for a while, mine was getting really, really long, and I could not see past it. So I added little icons to the side so that I could quickly scan, and anything that had a pumpkin was for October, anything that had a leaf was for November. And so it allowed me, because it was visual, to work clearer and set better priorities and manage my workload. What is it like with Spanish? Like Spanish isn't visual. It's the same as regular English. Is there how are you taking in the information that's new and having it stick?
It was when I remembered that as dyslexic people, we need to know the big picture, that it all clicked. And
So
I
you
started to
learned
get
you like learned the bigger the what is the bigger picture of Spanish?
So I feel like in a funny way, I mean, for anyone who's way deeper into learning foreign languages or Spanish, you're going to be like, girl, you're only at the beginning. Like, you think, like, please. But so remember, I don't know for anyone who has not heard this story before, when I was at school, I was told I was too thick to learn a foreign language. So I have never had a foreign language class. So simple things like learning how to conjugate words and all of that kind of stuff was completely new to me. I was taken out of all language classes at the age of 6. So simple strategies of what you do in a foreign language was completely new to me. So just having a kind of a word and then changing it to like I, we, you, I'd never been able to do before. And now I know multiple versions of the past tense options. And so I just think of it like a massive jigsaw puzzle. I know the top word, and then I'm just bolting on whatever ending I need to make it make sense. And then eventually
Oh.
the more you do it, it just becomes in your mind, you just know it, like you know English. So what I always say to my teacher, whenever she tries to explain something to me, I'm like, explain to me the rule, explain to me so I understand it. And I take a long time to really understand the rule. And then I try and practice it into individual words and get really comfortable so that I'm not thinking about the rule. But it was when I knew that I needed to learn the big picture that everything started to change. And again, that is exactly what I do in other areas of the business. Whenever we're trialing out something new, I'm like, okay, why are we doing it this way? What is going on? Like, what's the rationale behind this? And it's the same with Spanish. So, we're doing a piece of work right now for speaking, and I'll be speaking Spanish in social media, which is absolutely terrifying. And the word aprender is to learn. And then I wanted to say, I learned. And I was like, well, aprendo is I learn, but that's in the present tense. So I'm trying to say past tense. And then I was like, oh, it's aprendí. Because I just thought, okay, what is the rule with the past tense? Oh, okay, it's for I, it's a little I with a little cap. And it just, yeah, just the big picture just made sense to me. And that's what I always strive to give myself whenever I'm learning something new. And usually everything clicks in a lot quicker from there.
So I want to point out something that you just said that I learned a long time ago. So I went to special classes as a kid called language therapy classes in the US. I don't know if they still do it. I don't know if that's how they treat dyslexia anymore, but I went to language therapy classes. And one of the things that I learned when learning how to write, this was the first grade, this is primary school, was prefix, suffix, and then I don't know what the core is called. I always just called it core. So it's that idea, especially when you get into like higher level sciences, of like there's a prefix that can change, and then there's a suffix that can change at the end. I think it's called a suffix. If it isn't, somebody can leave a comment and let us know we got it wrong. But the idea is the same in Spanish, is you're just changing the end. So in words like in English, if I wanted to make it past tense, I would just change the suffix to ed instead of e.
Exactly.
Um,
It's just the same. And what's nice about Spanish comparative to English, and again, the actual language people will be like, not really, is mostly there are rules. There's not that many irregular ones. There are, a fair few, but there's not loads and loads and loads. So you can generally figure it out quite quickly. So, and I kind of, and the other thing that really flipped me to learning to love Spanish was I learned that English has 125,000 words and Spanish has 90,000 words. And it used to drive me nuts that they use words like también can mean both, me too, and I agree. And it's like,
ugh.
what? What do you like? How the hell do I figure it out? And then I was like, no, Natalie, you have 30,000 words less to use. Like,
Mm.
you have to learn 30,000 less words. This is genius. This is my language. I'm in. And instead of now thinking to myself, oh my God, how annoying, I'm like, yes, okay, I've got one word. And now I just get to like sprinkle a load of different meanings with it. I kind of once I went up to the big picture of, hang on, that means I've got 30,000 words less to learn, I was in. I was like, this is genius. So I think lots of things like that have really helped me to know where to start with a process, but also help me feel comfortable to kind of going along the way.
So I'm gonna pivot us for a second because I love a good ADHD moment here. How do you take that and make it work at work? So I'm listening to this podcast. Well, I just got real meta for a second. I'm thinking of me listening to this podcast and I'm in the podcast. I
It's
my
true
brain just
for
exploded.
anyone that's confused by that statement.
Yeah, sorry. Woo, that was wild. Um, so if a listener is listening to this podcast and they're like, okay, great, that's Natalie knows how to learn Spanish and Katie knows how to learn sign language. What how does somebody take the things that we've learned learning languages and apply it to everyday life? Like what's the takeaway today? What do we want people to walk away with being like, here's the tip?
I just it stops me feeling like a burden for asking all of the stupid questions because I just know that I'm building up the big picture. It's okay. So we have another project going on at the moment that we had to upskill ourselves in an area of the business that we don't know a lot about. And my first thought is I just need to have a lot of conversations with people who've done this before and just understand their journey, understand what went on, and ask questions because I know that I needed to learn the big picture. So I wasn't sat there thinking, my God, I've got another annoying question. This is so embarrassing. Or going into the meetings with people thinking, oh, I just don't know what I'm doing. I'm so confused. I was like, okay, I've got to get the big picture on this fast. And I had two or three meetings with people who'd done it before. And I was like, what I need from you is I need to ask you a lot of questions. And then once I start to piece it all together, I'll come up with the genius idea. And we haven't had this conversation yet, but I'm excited to tell you, have a genius idea of how we're going to get the thing that we need because of the big picture conversation and questions I've been asking. I know that's awful for the audience, but I have something exciting to tell Katie after this.
Yeah. Well, that's a tease for everyone else. Um, my tip on this is going to be if I'm like, gosh, now all I can think about is what you have to say. So my tip on this is probably going to be to find the base patterns of your life. So for me, I am a visual person. If I see it, I remember it. Like I can think back to lectures at university where somebody put something on the board and I can still see the picture of the board in my mind. Do I know what the context is anymore? No, but I can see the words. So lean in if you're in that workspace to the visual systems, right? If you've got a system that's already visual and maybe it's not working for you, try color coding it. If you've tried color coding it, try chunking it into, subtasks and whatnot. I mean, don't go too crazy because then you'll spend your whole life making lists. But, even in meetings, so I used to in school, I have a degree in history, so it was a lot of writing. I used to have three different pens on me at all times, a blue pen, a black pen, and a pencil. And I had a system for note taking where if the professor mentioned a book that sounded interesting that was not part of the class, I would put it in a little square box on the right hand side of the page. So anytime I flipped through my notes and I was like, what was that book he recommended that might be a good source for this paper? I could flip through and there it is in that box on the side. So it's creating visual systems to support you in meetings or in your workload management. Or I think that would be my tip for like how to learn things is get visual and it will stick in your brain a lot better.
And that's why Notion has changed our life. That who, what,
Hmm.
when section we have, where each person has their own little section, and all of the tasks that go underneath that is everything you need to do. And it's just life changing for, okay, what have I got going on? What do I need to do? Let me just try and think about all of the things that are going on because behind the scenes, there is 1,000 things going on in the business all the time, and it is stressful. So having that visual overview of what we need to do is so helpful.
Well, and to flip it as a team member. So if anyone's thinking about like, oh, well, I don't want to like put my business out there as a team member, right? It is awesome to be able to see your workload and Amy's workload and Jacob's workload because I know if I can bother someone. Or I know if my list is 17, 18, 26 items long and Amy's is 6, I can reach out to Amy and be like, hey, girl, can you take this off my plate? I know not every company works that way, but just being visual about it makes a huge difference for the people around you as well.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes Katie will scold me, be like, Natalie, you've got 25 things on your Notion list, and some of those have got subtasks you can't take on anymore. And I'm like, fine, fine, I guess. You're right. So, yeah, I think big picture is the thing that's really helpful for me, and visual systems is the thing that really changes the game for you.
Yeah, especially when it comes to learning new info. I love a good, like, let's get out the whiteboard and work through this real quick kind of
Mhm.
mentality. It makes a
Mm.
huge difference seeing it. So, thanks guys for coming this week. It's been so great. Can't wait to see you guys next week where we talk about how to learn more stuff,
I actually don't know what we haven't planned next week's episode.
where we talk about whatever December's topic is going to be.
Yeah. No, no, no. Well, we need something slightly more that's like veering off the edge. Now, to wrap things up, obviously, here at Dyslexia and Adults, we love giving tips, as you know, Katie, but bigger than that, we want people to really reframe the way that they look at dyslexia and think about things differently. And my big thing with learning Spanish is about changing my mentality to believe that I can do it, that it is possible, that means everything to me after having so many years of being told that I can't. And I see that in so many dyslexic people. They just feel like they can't do something. And so hopefully this episode has encouraged you to realize that you can do things, but just differently. What's one thing that you would love people to reframe when it comes to learning new things?
So, learning new things from a reframe perspective on like the getting visual. I know it can feel embarrassing to like get up in the middle of a meeting and start putting something on the board, but I've heard you say this and I think it's probably a company motto at this point. When you are dyslexic, a lot of times the way you do things are the best way to do things.
Oh, yes.
Neurotypicals, yeah, right? Neurotypicals just don't always, or people with other neurodiversities don't always see things our way, and it usually we're the best way. I'm gonna gloat about it. And so my thought is like, even if it feels embarrassing to do it, you're not the only one in the meeting struggling. You're not the only one who's going to understand the idea
Bored.
better.
You're not the only one in the meeting who's bored.
Oh
Bored
my
as
God, yeah.
fuck. Like,
Mm-hmm.
spice
Mm-hmm.
up the meeting, be the person who's a little bit bold. You have no idea what it will do and like the things that people will respect you for it.
Yeah. Well, and just the extra confidence you're gonna get. So I'm all about the reframe here is don't be embarrassed. Just take action. Do the visual system you need. Ask the questions you need. It's going to make a difference for you and everyone around you.
Love it. Let's end there.
Okay. Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Dyslexia and Adults podcast. Whether or not this is your first listen or your 100th, I am so grateful that you decided to entrust me with this challenge. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I would really appreciate it if you could review and subscribe to the podcast because it really helps us to reach more people.